Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. And on today's show, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful regulatory agencies in the state of Texas that regulates everything except the railroad lines. It is the Texasrailroad Commission, and it is one of the most powerful regulatory agencies in the state of Texas. And so many years back, it gave up the ability to regulate railroad lines. We'll explain that in this show. And on today's show, we have a gentleman in studio here today that is running for the Railroad Commissioner. And James Matlock. James, lifelong Texan. James, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Good. Well, it's glad to have you on the show. I think we're going to have an incredible show. The Rail Commission, the areas of the areas of our lives in Texas that it regulates is incredibly impactful, but not really well known. And we're going to go deep and heavy into these issues and explain what the Railroad Commission does and why. What are the pertinent issues facing it today? And James, he has a career in oil and gas, if I understand correctly. Yes. Is that right?
Correct.
And the driving issue for James, the reason James is running for the Rail Commission is to represent the rights of landowners and mineral rights owners. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, it's good to meet you. Welcome to the show. James, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm lifelong Texas, 6th gen, and, I served in the Marine Corps after high school, got out, moved right back to Texas, and started a career in oil and gas after a few years. I've worked everything from trucking to disposals, landman, which is going out getting leases signed, title runs, things like that, making sure who owns the minerals. And, I never thought of getting into politics, but after the fiascos of the past 4 years, it's like, okay, I'm tired. It's time we had somebody to represent the industry and represent the people of Texas in a fair and precise way.
What does the Railroad Commission do?
The Railroad Commission is the state's permitting regulatory oversight agency of the pipeline, oil and gas pipeline and mining industries in Texas. We started out in 1891 to ensure fairness amongst trade or the tariffs and access to the rail lines. In the 30s, they gave us oil and gas permitting. And then in the 40s, when they started the big inch, little inch pipelines, they put pipelines on the Railroad Commission. And then in the 90s, they put coal mines on the Railroad Commission. And then in 2005, they took the rail and gave it to TxDOT. So,
okay. Why is this regulatory agency important to the lives of people in Texas?
Well, Texas is oil and gas capital of the world. We depend on our oil and gas industry, and we need to make sure somebody is representing the industry and the people alike. So the Railroad Commission strives to make sure that the industry adheres to the environmental standards. They want to make sure that we are able, we keep production up, we keep the prices up, keep the prices stabilized, to where the companies are making money, the people of Texas are, surviving.
So you said that the reason that you're running is to represent the rights of landowners and property owners, of mineral rights owners and property owners. What does that mean?
Well, one of my key campaign promises is, I'm hoping to expand Rule 40, which is your horizontal drilling. And, when we look at the mineral owners, if they drill a lateral well 2, 3, 4 miles away from the wellhead, there's a lot of farmland and things in there that are not getting paid. So, I want to make sure the mineral owners are getting paid for any and all minerals that's been extracted from under their property. And then, we've got to make sure our surface owners are being taken care of as well. We don't need any environmental disasters or anything like that. So,
Okay, so there's two parties that you're concerned about that you want to represent in the state of Texas.
correct.
It is the mineral rights owners
Yes.
and then the surface owners, the landowners. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. And then the industry as a whole, make sure we're making money as a state, as an industry.
Okay. But let's step back just to
Okay.
the two parties, the residents of Texas.
Yes.
Let's first talk about the mineral rights owners. What are and I know I'm asking you to repeat yourself, what are the issues that represent mineral rights issues? What are the issues that you're concerned about for their well-being?
Well, there's a host of issues. And number one, it's the horizontal drilling, where the operator drills a well and then they do a kick and run out somewhere around 4 miles away
Okay,
from
real
the
quick, if I
well.
may say, horizontal drilling is drilling at an angle, correct?
Correct.
And they do that, the reason they do that is because it gives them greater access to the minerals underneath or something of that sort?
Well, they can actually do a full kick and make a 90 turn and run 4 miles from here to there, at a full 90 turn. And when they do that, that's to give them more coverage. I love the concept of horizontal drilling because otherwise they'd have to drill 8 to 10 more wells, which would take up, 8 to 10 more acres of land. If they can.
So what you're saying, if I may say, you penetrate the ground in one spot and you cover a greater amount of land by going horizontally.
Yes.
And rather than having to tap the ground at multiple spots.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why this is popular.
Yes.
Okay.
And, but at the same time, we have a lot of land, a lot of mineral owners in between that are not being paid because the current rule states at minimum 40 acres right around the wellhead is considered the unit, and that's where the pay is. So, we have a lot of mineral owners not getting paid for their minerals.
So in other words, you can tap the ground, and when you tap that ground, you are only responsible for paying out mineral rights for the surrounding 40 acres, but you can go out beyond that area.
Correct.
And pull from other people's minerals that you are not required to pay.
Correct.
How is that allowed?
When I started my campaign for 24 race, I had oil and gas attorney. She reached out. She was like, "Where were you in the 90s when I was fighting this?" Well, I was a Marine back then. I didn't know anything about the oil and gas industry. So, but I'm here now, and please join my campaign.
So you're saying the laws were set up erroneously for this ability for people for property theft?
Well, it wasn't set up for that. The problem is the laws haven't changed. It was set up when we were doing strictly vertical drilling, where going 8, 9, 10,000, 12,000 feet
and they're
straight down.
Right, and then at that point, the 40 square
40
mile rule makes sense.
Yes,
But
and
then you go in at a horizontal angle.
when they started the horizontal drilling, nobody updated the rule to cover that wellbore.
So how is this not just a complete state of pandemonium where everyone is stealing from everyone else's neighbor?
There's quite a bit of that going on. Like I said, there's a lot of farmlands. I know I've been helping people since 2007. When I was a landman, I started working with people to find out if they had any wells under their property or not, and, encourage them to write letters. And, I've had several contact me afterwards. They ended up getting, $75,000 to $250,000 lump sum checks because, they had wells under their property.
I just feel like so many people are susceptible to being robbed.
Yeah.
If there's an elderly person out there that has mineral rights underneath them, they are very vulnerable to somebody who has a little bit better knowledge of things, just taking those rights away, or minerals right away from them.
Correct. And, you know, when I first got out of the Marine Corps, I worked in the logwoods of East Texas. And, you know, if we cut a tree down on the property line, it falls across the line, then that tree is considered theirs. And the company that I worked for, you know, I know one company had to pay $2,000 for a pine tree that might have brought 125. But, you know, it was encroachment is what they call it. Oil and gas is 10,000 feet below the surface. Nobody can see the encroachment. So, you know, that's where it ends up. That's how the rules haven't been forced to change the rules yet.
So, what will you do? What can be done, and what do you intend to do should you be elected railroad commission to fix this problem?
You know, there's 2 other commissioners, so, you know, have to work with them. Then, you know, but that is something that can be changed from a commission level, not have to go through the legislature to get it changed.
Why hasn't anyone done it before?
Good question.
I mean,
that's why I'm running. I'm tired of the lies.
Is there going to be an industry? Is there going to be business interests that rise up to stop you? Is there any parties out there that would not want this legislation to pass?
Yes, there's a lot of.
And why don't they want it to pass?
Because currently that is their gravy train. You know, because that not having to pay out the mineral rights on that, and you know they are making more money.
So if you don't mind me saying, I feel like the problem is slightly understated. Yes. There are groups that are profiteering from this, and they don't want the laws to change. And that's why it hasn't been changed. This is egregious. It hasn't been changed simply because people don't know about it. There's a reason. It's that There's a business element that doesn't want it changed.
Correct. You know, it'll be an uphill battle. We'll have, you know, there'll be many hearings trying to get it changed. You know, and we'll have to depend on Texans to take a stand and actually get vocal, become active, and, you know, say, okay, enough's enough. We need this done. Okay, so the issue,
I'm going to repeat the issue. The issue is that the laws are set up so that you are required, when you drill a hole, it was set up for vertical drilling, where when you would drill a hole, you were required to pay out mineral rights for the surrounding 40 acres, but then people came in and they started drilling at horizontally at an angle, and they've then surpassed that the well has surpassed that 40-acre limit, and now they're pulling from other areas. Do you have any personal stories of people getting harmed from this?
I don't have any of people getting harmed. I mean, you know, people losing money or losing minerals that they didn't know they were losing, yes. But, you know, from people getting harmed from...
That's what I mean. By harmed, I mean financially harmed.
Yes. You know, it happens a lot. You know, like I said, I've worked with several people. One was actually in East Texas. He worked for a university, and I was sitting in his office working on a project, and I asked him, or he asked me, said, hey, look, if you need land in West Texas, I've got this, you know, I'll sell you the minerals too, because I'm not making anything off of it. And I asked him where his land was. He said, Howard County. I said, okay. I said, that is one of the hot spots. Why are you not making money? They say there's nothing under my land. And this guy was already in his 80s. And, you know, I had him pull up on maps, and then I pulled up on the Railroad Commission website, and I was able to show him he had 2 wells running under his place. And then, you know, I sat down with him. He was helping me on a project, so I helped him on this one. We wrote letters, and he ended up getting a check for $80,000, $90,000, and, you know, one lump sum. But they know that it's there. And, you know, when you confront, they'll pay you a lump sum out of it. But, you know, and then another guy out in the West Texas area, kind of the same ordeal, you know, he had a couple of wells running under his place, and he got $140,000, $150,000 out of and a lump sum payment out of them on those. So, it happens more often than not.
How did these men prove that their land, that their minerals rights were being taken by a third party?
Well, you can go to the Railroad Commission website and you can see the horizontal runs. And as long as you can zoom in and see where your property is, if there's a well running under your property, it's all it takes is a screenshot and, hey, look, I'm in this area and your well's running under here. So, when you do that, then, you have to write the oil and gas company and a few others, to let them know that, you mean business. But most people have no idea what's going on under subsurface.
So what are the issues for, you said that the mineral rights were one party that you want to represent the rights of, and then you also said landowners, the surface landowners. What is the issue with regards to them and horizontal drilling on their land, or in horizontal drilling?
Well, the horizontal drilling really doesn't affect the surface owners that much. The issues facing the surface owners would be, making sure that when we plug a well or something like that, that we do it in a manner to make sure that we don't have water pollution or anything like that going across other properties. Lake Bomer, for anyone not familiar with that, Imperial, Texas, called the Dead Sea of Texas. That's already flooded 80 acres of land, and it was a old well that came to life in 2005, I think it was. And, it leaks 250 gallons a minute, has been for 20 years.
Of water?
Of water, produced, your brine water, oil and gas, brine water, stuff like that. So
it was a well that was leaking water, and it flooded?
Yes, and it's still leaking today. It hasn't been fixed, which there's not an easy fix to it. But, the problem is, ever since it started, TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, they say that it was originally drilled for hydrocarbons. The Railroad Commission says that it was plugged back and turned into a water well. They've been pitching the blame back and forth, who's responsible for 20 years. Meanwhile, TxDOT's had to spend over $15 million to reroute a farm road in that area, which they spent my money, your money, to do that. That makes it our problem. I don't care who claims responsibility for it. Somebody needs to step up and say, you know what, let's fix this. They refuse to even acknowledge it.
Okay, so the third party you said you want to represent is the issue is you want to make sure that overall our energy sector, our energy production is safe. Can you expand on that?
With the introduction of the AI data centers, things like that, it takes a lot of water and a lot of energy. We need to make sure, we...
For example, Bitcoin mining.
Correct.
Through computers takes a lot of energy and
Yes.
and water.
Yes.
To cool the machines?
Yes, sir. The water cools the machines, pulls the heat off, and, I've got a resolution that I'm trying to get everybody to jump on board with that would make it to where the AI data centers had to dig sort of like the oil and gas industry does. We have reserve pits, where we store water and we use that for the drilling process. Now, if we take and do the same with the Bitcoin mining operations, then we can dig 3 40 by 40 by 10 foot ponds, reserve pits, fill them full of water. That's over 300,000 gallons of water. Your smaller data centers would take roughly 300,000 gallons a day, and it would be recycled. But then your larger data centers take over 5 million gallons a day. If we could encourage the use of recycled oil and gas wastewater for this instead of actually pulling the water out of the aquifers, that would also save our aquifers for municipal use, farm use, things like that.
So you're talking about building a secondary supply of water,
Correct.
specifically for this industry.
Yes, and you have it to where the recycled oil and gas water, instead of having it injected back into the ground, we could actually reuse it to make sure
Okay, so what is the water used for in the oil and gas? What do they use it for before they recycle it?
Well, when we drill a well, the water, we have what's a wet, dry field. We have the water pushing the oil and natural gas to the surface. And, so the water comes up and then
you put the water in the
goes
ground, it
back
pushes
into
everything
the
to the top.
ground. And a lot of times it goes into a zone not capable of production of hydrocarbons. But, or in some instances, you have the water flood program where they inject it back into the same zone they're producing out of, which helps push the oil and gas to the production wells.
Okay, and so that water, once it's done being used, they just put it back in the ground?
Correct. And, once it comes up, they just put it back in the ground. But with recycling projects, you run it through, you recycle, extracting various minerals and, such as lithium, uranium, things like that. And once you extract that, then, you can...
You pull out the lithium out of it.
You pull out the lithium out of the water.
And the other toxins.
Other minerals and stuff. Then you can use the water for farm irrigation or anything like that. As long as it's clean, which we need to make sure, with the testing, we need to get testing in place to make sure we're not putting traces of PFAS chemicals and things like that on our farmland, which would then ultimately destroy the farmland. So, but they could use that water for the data mining, and that would, make it to where we didn't have to pull 5 million gallons of water a day out of the aquifer to cool the equipment.
Very interesting conversation. Just makes me think. I want to share a quote that you gave recently.
Okay.
Quote, "Don't tell me there's an energy crisis when I'm still seeing waste," unquote. What does that mean?
With the green energy push, for example, during the previous administration, more especially, everything was a crisis. And, it's one crisis after another, and they're trying, ultimately it is to try and jump the price up or raise taxes, whatever. We need more money is the ultimate of any crisis you see. You've heard in politics, don't let a good crisis go to waste. That's what it's all about. And, the green energy and things, don't sit here and tell me there's a crisis when we're still flaring natural gas and, PUC won't issue permits, ERCOT won't purchase from, companies wanting that would set up natural gas powered generators. And, last cycle when I ran, they actually picked up on it. One thing they did was, they bought a contract with your big box stores to have access to their natural gas generators sitting on the roof. If we need additional power, we'll just turn it on and we'll pay you for what we use. And but why that didn't help with the flare gas. Let's kill two birds with one stone. Strengthen our grid, make our energy more affordable, and reduce the emissions that are going out into the atmosphere.
Okay, so you're saying that, and we see the flare gas,
Correct.
correct? And we see them. They're the what type of what the gas is coming out?
Methane.
Methane's coming out, right? Methane's coming out, and they're burning it off to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And you're saying let's use that for productive purposes.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, it's time we become a little more efficient at everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And I'm sorry to ask the question again, but how would we use that flare gas for more productive uses?
well, number one, you know, you could connect a natural gas powered generator and feed 1.5 megawatts back into the grid at various location points, which would secure our grid as well. Because as I'm learning from other people, you know, we're 12 steps away from having total blackout across the country. And, you know, so we need to make sure we strengthen our grid and secure it. And then also, you know, there's another, I guess, new technology that would allow us to process the natural gas on location, which would give us all the heptanes and propanes, tech water, cetane 80 diesel, stuff like that. Those products go into making your medical equipment, your cell phones, your water bottles. You know, cetane 80 diesel is one that is a very pure form of diesel. So if the refinery has a low-grade diesel, they can mix the cetane 80 with it and have a better grade diesel at minimal cost to the refinery. But, you know, and majority of those products are currently being imported from China. So, you know, we flare enough natural gas here, we should have a big foothold in our own backyard instead of that much import coming in. You know, and it also goes to make your makeup, your perfumes. You know, there's very few aspects of your daily life that oil and gas does not touch.
Yeah, why would we be bringing it in from China if we have so much here that we're burning it off?
Yes, you know, and so, you know, we need to make sure we address those as well.
One of the items that you mentioned that would be a priority for your candidacy, for your campaign, would be water infrastructure. Water infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, that goes back to the AI data centers. You know, we need to help protect our aquifers and make sure that's used for residential sources. But then, you know, for our commercial businesses, you know, 588 million gallons a day, you know, there's ways we could actually help our industrial complex while reserving our water rights and stuff for the individual landowner, farmers, things like that.
What are orphan wells?
So orphan wells are wells that were drilled and then for whatever reason, you know, well, a lot of times your mega companies, you know, like the Exxons, Chevrons, Devons of the world, they go out and they drill 800 wells this year. And a well's going to start out with very strong production. Over time, it's going to taper off, and then it hits a point to where it's not meeting the dollar signs that the company thinks. So they're going to sell it off to another smaller operator, and it may sell again, then it may sell again. They're still getting production off of it. It's
Less of a production.
Less of a production. And, you know, eventually you'll end up with 10 barrels a day of oil coming out of a well. If we have a severe drop in price, that oil company, small mom and pop oil company, may end up having to file bankruptcy. The wells that they have are just left unattended, unchecked for years, decades, and they sit on the list with the Railroad Commission. That's part of the state liability. So, you know, currently we have almost 8,000 orphan wells across Texas alone. And, you know, we need to address those issues.
What are the issues with these wells? So they're wells that are essentially, are they still in production or they're not in production?
No, they're not in production. They've been
drained.
Well,
largely.
They've been drained, but they still have pressure on them. They still have some life left to them. You know, and some of them could be turned into geothermal wells to help generate other energy sources, whatever. So, you know, there's other ways that we could utilize, and some of the wells just produce so much water that it's not economically viable to open it up as oil production well, because you're going to end up spending more money hauling off the water. Since we started mining lithium out of the produced water, you know, some of the wells could be turned into lithium mines. So, you know, there's things that we could do to get them off of our liability roll. Make it easier for other companies or other projects to adopt the wells.
Are the orphan wells a threat or a danger in any way?
They are. You know, anytime metal comes in contact with high salt content, H2S, or anything like that, the metal starts breaking down, and eventually, you know, you'll have production strains and casing that just starts deteriorating, falling in. You'll end up with holes and cracks in it. Sometimes it'll leak to the surface. More importantly, it leaks into the aquifer. And, you know, so we need to make sure that somebody's monitoring the well and keeping check on the integrity.
One of the things that you mentioned to me earlier today, and maybe we covered this already, but the responsibility of the water has been handed over to a group called TCQ, and that was handed to them by the legislature.
Correct.
What does that mean?
Well, when the legislators, they got together, decided, you know, and I'll tell you, I was shocked when they did it, because that was my campaign in 24 was let's recycle the produced water. And, you know, they actually got together in the 89th legislative session and passed a bill stating that we could, you know, that operators could start recycling. Now, two things that they did in that bill that I did not necessarily approve of was, number one, they told the operator that they could sell the water to the recycle facility. Anytime there's a sale takes place like that, you know, 25 cents a barrel, whatever they're selling it for, you know, there's lithium in that water. Now, they're extracting the lithium out. Our mineral owners are not getting paid. So, you know, there's one big issue there. Number two, you know, you've got the fact that they gave responsibility of the produced water over to TCEQ, which is the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Now, granted, when it's discharged into the ecosystem, that would be TCEQ responsibility to make sure it's clean. But, you know, prior to the discharge, we need to make sure that our mineral owners are getting paid. So the Railroad Commission needs to be in charge of it up to a certain point to help ensure, you know, our mineral owners are paid. And then one thing that I was disappointed with the legislators about, you know, I got on board with another group that was trying to get legislation passed that would require PFAS testing in order to, they're out of Johnson County. If you're not familiar with Johnson County, I urge everybody to look up, see what's going on up there. But, you know, they've got a bad case dealing with PFAS up there. So
what is PFAS?
PFAS is the forever chemicals such as Teflon, stuff like that. So, you know, we tried to get a bill passed, and, you know, for any water discharged, it would require PFAS testing. But that bill never made it out of committee. So, you know, without the testing in place, not really sure what's being discharged into the ecosystem. Now, you would hope people would do the right thing, and a majority will. You'll end up with those few who are chasing the dollar, and, they'll cut every corner possible.
Is there a project right now to drill 40 water wells in East Texas?
There is. They're looking to drill the water wells in East Texas to pipe water from East Texas to Dallas, primarily to help with the AI data centers that's being built in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because that requires a lot of water. That's part of the reason I co-authored this resolution that I've got, trying to make sure we limit their use of our resources. And
who's they?
The AI data centers.
So you put together a proposal to limit the use of our natural resources by AI data centers.
Correct. I worked with a couple other people. We drew up a resolution and, trying to get it front and center before the legislators. Hopefully we can get it turned into a bill, get it passed. But, these water wells, they would draw 1.5 billion gallons of water per year from the Carrizo Aquifer in East Texas. And, that aquifer runs from Texarkana all the way to Laredo. So if they're pulling that much in East Texas...
They're doing that already, or this is the proposal?
That's the proposal. And, if we're looking at that, then you'll end up with places down in the valley who, the aquifer's already low down there. They're having to drop their line, their water lines deeper into the ground just to get water. If they start pulling that much from East Texas, it's going to make it even lower. And there's some of the wells in East Texas where they're actually having to go back. They've been they drilled them 8-10 years ago. They're having to go back to the municipal wells and drop the lines 40, 80 feet just to get them back in the water. So, our aquifers are running low, but, and a lot of that is due to the corporate structure as well.
Is this project to drill 40 water wells in East Texas to pipe them to Dallas, is this being proposed, or is it already happening, or is it scheduled to happen?
It's being proposed. The
and who's proposing it?
There's two companies, and, they financially backed by Kyle Bass, through Nestle Water and stuff like that, who's wanting the water piped up to Dallas.
Who's Kyle Bass?
He is a businessman in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and, he's got a lot of different businesses stretched out across Texas and everywhere. So, he's bought up, I think it's 11,000 acres of land in East Texas to drill these water wells on. And, the Texas legislature, they shut him down for now. They've got a bill. It didn't make it through regular session. It didn't make it through special session yet, but, they're talking about coming back and pushing a little harder on it. I'm not sure where that's going to end up, but, we do need to make sure our aquifers are stabilized and, our communities don't suffer. And, I know several mayors who have, their communities have run out of water for 2 or 3 days due to the aquifer being drained as much as it has been.
So, yeah, just to sum up, it sounds like we have this rise in data centers, and they have a serious requirement of water.
Yes.
And so these businessmen are now looking at any availability that they can to get water. They're considering going to East Texas, go out into our rural lands, get the water out there, pipe it to our urban center, which is Dallas, at the potential expense and at the possibly the the harming, the well-being of the people that live in East Texas.
Correct. And, they're looking at building a 300,000 acre reservoir up in Northeast Texas, same group, Region C. And, they would use eminent domain, kick 7-8 generations off farmland, destroy the 300,000 acres of ecosystem in the process.
Do you think they'd be able to pull that off?
Look at all the reservoirs they've done so far. And my thing is, we can't even keep the reservoirs full that we've got now. Now I get it. The July 4th floods, Lake Travis is now setting well above where it has been for years. Prior to that, Lake Travis which is in Austin area, it was setting somewhere around 43% capacity. Now it's up 89, 95, somewhere along in there. And, there's other lakes down in the valley that I've been working with the different communities. And these reservoirs down there are setting at 12, 13% capacity. They're on the verge of being out of water.
And where are these ones at?
Down in, like, Three Rivers, Kennedy area, South Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And, so there's a lot of water issues going on. And, I know they've got one desalinization plant in Corpus. They're looking at adding additional plants down there that would help move water. I've heard that they're looking at building one somewhere around the ship channel here in Houston. So, water is a big issue. And, we're trying to address it some ways better than others. So,
how effective are desalinization plants at water production?
I've never really researched the full effectiveness of it. I spent almost 2 years on an aircraft carrier. We never ran out of water through the desal plant and stuff. So, your submarines, things like that, if the Navy can do it, we should be able to do it pretty readily.
And that water was totally digestible, was no problems at all?
Yes.
But Navy carrier or whatever doesn't compare to providing the water for an entire community.
No, and now, well, on an aircraft carrier, it would provide for a small community.
How many people are on an aircraft carrier?
Anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 people.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. So you've got a small city floating around.
That's a small city, yeah.
So it would.
So it does have the capacity to do serious. Well, why isn't it looked at as more of a solution? Because that to me seems like the obvious answer.
Well, on that, it would require a huge investment in infrastructure, pipelines, and to get from one side of the state.
But the reservoirs also require pipelines.
Correct. And if we could connect desal plants to reservoirs, things like that, to help keep the reservoirs full, I think that would be a great answer.
Well, and I am, as this interview goes on, I'm appreciating your solutions of using recycled water. And as I understand it, the recycled water that you'd be pulling from is water that was used for the wells.
Correct.
So that water was used in the wells to push the oil up and things of that sort. And the water has lithium in it, correct?
Correct.
And lithium is a precious commodity that can be used in the manufacturing of a number of items everyday items that we use.
Yes.
And so your issue is that if we pull that water out, for number one, the mineral rights owner needs to be paid, and that's not happening today because TCQ is over that process, correct? And they have no vested interest in representing the rights of the mineral owner. They have a vested interest in supposedly representing the rights of the environment, right?
Correct.
And I totally challenge that idea because everyone has a vested. This idea that one governmental agency has the best interests of the environment, that's always used as a weapon against us. We all want the environment. We all have a vested interest in the environment being saved. But TCQ doesn't give a gosh darn about the mineral rights and who needs to be properly paid.
No.
And But your solution would be to use that water. I mean, does that idea to use that water to fuel these, to clean for the purposes of these data centers? Is that idea have any chance of getting liftoff? I mean, what's the issue with it?
You know, I just got this resolution drawn up 3 weeks ago. You know, I've got a lot of county chairs and stuff who are jumping on board with it. You know, hey, I like this concept. We really need to protect our water. We haven't really had a chance to advance it anywhere yet. We're still working to get that, trying to garner support for it.
Well, that'll be an interesting development.
Yes.
And, you know, I want to jump back to a topic that you mentioned a while back. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. The issue, again, is that typically in the past, we only did vertical drilling. And so they did vertical drilling. The legislature created a law that said in a 40-mile square radius around that well, people were to be paid out. And since that time, we've had horizontal drilling, which allows the well to go beyond that 40-mile radius. And your solution is to expand the 40-mile radius so everyone gets paid, correct?
Well, it's the 40-acre rule. You know, you can
40 acres, I
40
apologize.
Acre. But yes, you know, my goal would be to expand the 40 acres to at least cover the full length of the vertical run or the horizontal run, and then go beyond it, beyond the end, and also to the back of the wellhead to make sure everybody's getting paid in the process, or within the bounds of where production would be coming.
What is Rule 40?
Well, basically, Rule 40 is just the 40-acre rule, that dictates how, the operators set up their units, and, it's essentially a minimum of 40 acres is what's required to have a unit.
And you want to expand that?
I want to expand that to where it, like I said, it runs the horizontal wells. For your vertical wells, that's still a viable source, but it does need to be expanded to catch up with technology.
How far would you expand it?
Well, if they run, it'd be 40 acres each side of the horizontal, and then, run it at least to the end of it, and 40 acres beyond, 40 acres back. Landman would be very busy, if I was able to get that pushed through, because then we'd have to reevaluate all the wells and things like that. So, to make sure we're up to date moving forward.
How much are vertical wells used today versus the new horizontal wells?
It depends a lot on who's actually drilling the well. If it's a small company, they're typically going to drill your vertical wells. The major companies, they're going to go deeper and get more into the horizontal aspects of it. Your vertical well costs you $2 to $5 million to drill. Your horizontal wells, depending on how far you go, $50 million, to drill one of those. And, then you complete
a vertical well is $2 million to drill.
Yes.
And a horizontal well is $50 million because it's getting a lot more reach.
Correct.
But and so there's the cost issue, but at the same time, you're getting an incredible return on your investment from that $50 million.
Correct. When you look, you've got pipe that's running, then 30 miles away from the wellhead, but then you end up with having to frack all that space through there, which takes a lot of time, a lot of water, things of that nature as well. It, for each stage of frack, it takes roughly 7 million gallons of water. So, if you're and then, that comes back up and it's typically injected back into the ground. But, with all that said, you're going to spend, 20 to 50 million to drill a horizontal well and complete it and bring it into production. But, your oil production is up, your natural gas production is up. The first year is, very strong output. Second year, you taper off, 10 to 15, maybe 20%. And then each year it has a little more decline in it. After about 7 to 10 years, you're down very stable. And that's usually when you see the oil companies sell it to a smaller company to let them take over production.
Does the Railroad Commission have any jurisdiction over offshore drilling?
There's a lot of orphan wells out in the bay, more especially over in Chambers County, Trinity Bay. There's a lot of wells out in that area. And I actually talked to one of the candidates last cycle, trying to figure out how the Railroad Commission could help Chambers County, come in and plug those wells plus bring economic value to, the project. So, I'm reaching out to people across state trying to find out how, as a candidate, how I could help them, fix things in their county.
And orphan wells are abandoned wells that are unplugged.
Correct.
And what are the issues with the orphan wells that are in offshore in the Chambers County area? What are the issues with that being there?
Well, like we talked earlier, usually it's the subsurface that you're dealing with because you've got a lot of salt content and things like that down subsurface, and you end up with a casing and things starting to deteriorate, fall down into the well. Then you end up with aquifer contamination. But when you start looking at offshore, you have the contaminants of seawater, the salt content in the seawater that's deteriorating the surface equipment, and then you end up with natural gas and water, things like that, leaking into the bay and, ultimately washing up on shore. You can, in certain areas, you can smell the gas, the H2S, coming out, and, you might can see the water kind of spraying out of a little pinhole or something. So, we need to get more active on those as well.
So the orphan wells are a real issue.
Yes, they are.
Oh, man. Last question. So I would think with all the drilling that's done, I know Texas is as big as can be, but what is our capacity to continue drilling on land? I would think that the well lines, now that they're going vertical, horizontal, that they're everywhere, they're crisscrossing over each other, and that, you always think the resources are finite. What is the state of drilling in the state of Texas?
We still have a century plus.
It's just an ocean under there.
Yes and no. Most people think, okay, it's like you drill down and there's a big, huge pool of oil. And that's not the case. The oil and natural gas, it flows through the pores inside the rock, and it just flows until you drill through. Then that opens it up, pressure release, and it flows back up the production string and to where it's put into pipelines, into tanks, whatever. So we still have
It's not an issue. We have plenty,
we still have plenty to get us through today.
and there's even more offshore.
Yes.
Fascinating conversation, James. I appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Good. Well, I asked you questions about 10 times. I'd ask you the same question about 10 times over.
Well,
It's all new to
you know,
me.
I want to make sure everybody understands exactly what the Railroad Commission is, what I'm hoping to accomplish once elected.
Fascinating conversation. So where can people find out more about you?
Look me up online. I'm on X, Facebook, my website, Matlock 4 FOR Texas. And then if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. You know, I mean, I'm always available, 936-320-3031.
Very good. James Matlock for Texas Railroad Commissioner. Thank you very much, James. It's been a great hour. Appreciate you big time.
Hard to believe an hour just passed.
There you go. Well, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show, and we